Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to continue our study of the book of Joshua. We are going to study chapter 16 together. It's a lot shorter than the chapter before, which in and of itself has some significance, the length, which you'll see in a moment. So after Judah, the next tribe to discuss is Joseph. Joseph had two tribes that were both part of the tribe of Joseph, which is Manasseh and Ephraim. We went into a lot of detail about the portion of Manasseh, of the half tribe of Manasseh that had received a portion together with Reuben and Gad on the east side of the Jordan. Half of Manasseh was on the west side, and we'll discuss that. But then there was the tribe of Ephraim, who was all on the west side of the Jordan. And throughout Tanakh, Ephraim became eventually the dominant tribe of the 10 tribes of the others. In other words, Judah was the dominant of the southern kingdom, and the dominant tribe often Haben Yakirli Ephraim. Very often, the northern tribes were just called by the name Ephraim, even though they were a collection of other tribes. Ephraim was the dominant one. So as kind of a counterweight to Judah, it makes sense we now discuss Joseph. So Vayetze HaGorol Vnei Yosef, and the portion that was given to the descendants of Joseph, and this is their Jordan. These are their boundaries. Again, as before, I'm only gonna touch on tiny issues. Tiny things. I might not translate a lot of these place names, but this is the boundary. So just as before, we go through the boundaries first, and it kind of draws a line from this town to this town to this town as the boundary, and then it discusses the cities within the boundaries, just like we did with the other tribes until now. Miyarden Yericho, starting from the Jordan at the area of Yericho, Jordan River, approximately at the level of Yericho. So this is about where the people had crossed into the land originally. Where the Jordan River was crossed by the people of Israel as they entered the land. Lemei Yericho Mizracha, going towards the waters of Yericho towards east. Hamidbar, towards the I'm sorry, from the waters of Yericho, which were on the east side. Hamidbar Ola Yericho, the wilderness going up from Yericho Bahar towards the mountain Beitel, towards the area of Beitel. V'yatzami Beitel Luza, and then the boundary continued going from the town of Beitel towards Luz. V'yavar El Gavol Ha'arki Atarot, and then it continued to the boundary of the Arki, the Arkite people, which lived in Atarot. V'yar Yama, then it went westward, El Gavol Ha'yafleti, to the boundary of the Yafleti people, Ad Gevol Beit Choron, until the boundary of Beit Choron, Tachton, the lower Beit Choron, Viad Gazer, until Gazer, Bayut Hotzos of Yama, and it also continued to the sea. Vayinchlu Vnei Yosef Menashe Ephraim, and the two tribes, descendants of Yosef, they inherited their portion. Those tribes are Menashe and Ephraim. Vayigvul Bnei Ephraim Mishpachosam, and the boundary of the people of Ephraim, according to their families, was as follows. Vayigvul Nachlasim Mizracha, their boundaries were eastward, Atrot Adar, of Atrot Adar ad Beit Choron Elyon, until the upper Beit Choron. V'yatza HaGvul Yama, and then their boundary went towards the west, HaMichmitot, from Michmitot Mitzafon, which was in the northern part of V'nasav HaGvul, and then the boundary went around Mizracha towards the east, Ta'anat Shiloh, towards Ta'anat Shiloh, V'avar Otomi Mizrach Yonocha, and then it passed up from the east towards Yanoach. V'yarad Yanocha, went down from Yanocha, Atarot V'naraso, Faga B'Yericho V'yatzayardin, and then it reached the town of Yericho, and then it went towards the Jordan, Mitapuach, and then from the place called Tapuach, Yelech HaGvul Yama, it went westward, Nachal Kana, V'ayutot Yama, it went to the sea. Zos Nachlat Mateh B'nei Ephraim L'Shpachosam, this was the portion of the of the people of Ephraim according to their families. V'ha'arim ha'mivdalot l'bnei Ephraim, and the towns that were within there, that were given to the people of Ephraim, in other words, that they had conquered these towns, or Pitoch Nachal Bnei Menashe, and in the portion of Menashe, Kol Ha'arim, they were given all the cities v'chatzrein. Now it's interesting, that's just one verse. Last chapter, if you recall, we read 30 verses listing all the cities in Judea that were, so it listed the boundaries, right, in a lot of detail, boundaries of Judah, and then it listed all the cities within it by name. Here it just says, and they also got all the cities in there. So we get the sense that the verses, not the sense, I mean, it's clearly doing that, are not emphasizing or going into the details of Ephraim's portion nearly as much as Judah. Why that is, we can speculate, but certainly, as we know, as time and history developed, Judah became the dominant tribe over the ensuing 1,000 years throughout the period of the Judges, the period of the First Temple, and eventually by the time of the period of the Second Temple, Judah was the only viable tribe left. Now here's an interesting thing, and this is the third time we have a mention of a place that was not conquered, and I am positing that the reason why it was not conquered was because as they were offered peace terms, as they were required to do by the Torah. And here, there's a little bit more proof, an indication that my interpretation here is correct, that it wasn't because they could not, in other words, militarily could not conquer it, but because they did not, because they were following the instructions of the Torah, and this would be according to the Nachmanides and Maimonides interpretation of the verses in Deuteronomy, which I'm going to refer to again in just a moment. And this is verse 10. V'lo horishu et haKanani hayoshev beGazer. The Canaanites that lived in the town of Gazer, they did not dispossess them. Vayeshev haKanani b'kerev Ephraim, and these Canaanites lived among the people of Ephraim ad hayom hazeh, until this time. Vayehi lemas oved, and they were as a taxed form of labor. Now, mas oved doesn't necessarily mean that they were enslaved. Mas oved mean when one polity in those days would conquer another, they would have them pay tribute to the central. This is the practice of all conquering nations in those days. When they conquered a place, if they didn't kill them, they would say, okay, you can live here, but you need to pay us X, Y, Z. This is what you have to do, or you have to supply us with something, to demonstrate your subservience to us, and that's like your tax for us keeping you safe, or whatever, however you want to look at it. And interestingly enough, this mas oved is exactly the language that's mentioned in Deuteronomy, which makes it difficult to imagine that so let's look at Deuteronomy 20. Ki tikrav el ir lihilachem aleh, and you get close to a city to wage war against it. Vikarasa eleh l'shalom. The first thing you do is you ask it for peace. You give it peace terms. V'haya im shalom ta'ancha. If they answer that they do want peace, ufatchalach, and they open their doors to you, they allow you in, and they say, yes, you can be the conquering nation. We're not going to fight you. We're not going to rebel. They will be as a mas va'avaducha, the same language as mas oved that we have here. So clearly, this is again, I don't know how you can get a better indication than this from the verse itself, that the towns were offered peace terms, and then as the Torah required, and then they were done mas oved. I know this is different from the way Rashi and many other interpretations understand this, and some places in Chazal as well. But from the verses themselves, this is the clear meaning of the verse. And this is the third time that a town was not conquered, but this time it's even more clearly referencing the Torah's command to offer peace terms first. And we're going to see more examples of this, and it's going to become even more clear that my interpretation is the simple meaning of the verse, and not just what I'm reading into it because I'm trying to see what I want to see. So thank you very much. This is the end of chapter 16. It's very short, and just note the fact that when we describe Joseph's portion, it's so much shorter than when we and so much more abbreviated than when we described Judah's portion, although we're not yet finished with Joseph's portion. We're going to come back to it a little bit in 17 when we study next. Thank you for studying chapter 16 together. Looking forward to studying the rest of the book together.